Hello and welcome to the fifth installment of RPG Design Talk. Today I'm joined by Paddy's of Paddy's Parlor game, and Paddy's put out some games and some adventure. Like he have like D10, which is a role-playing game, a rule-light role-playing game. He put also a war game called Mutants, which is much more in depth, and he got this hilarious adventure called The Boys from Metza. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, it's from Mez Tejas. It's
Tejas, yeah. Well, yeah, it's like Avengers kind of speaks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you, Paddy, for joining me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Good afternoon. Happy Saturday to everybody.
I always like to ask my guests on the first question, like, what was your impetus for starting to put product out there and create a? What was the push that gave you, like, you know what, I had my own idea. I want to put them out there. What gave you the push there?
So I kind of became disaffected from Wizards of the Coast towards the beginning of 4th edition and stuff like that. Started playing a couple of different other games like Iron Kingdoms RPG. I've talked a lot about to other people. Testing out some other RPGs, and just eventually, as time went on, more companies just started saying stuff and doing things that I didn't agree with, and started playing my own homebrew rules that were derived from other games that I really liked. As far as actually publishing them and putting them out, it didn't really occur to me that was an option. And, you see stuff on Drive Through RPG for self-publishing and whatnot, but I didn't really think I was there. I started writing books, and then I almost put it to the wayside, but it was around the time that Venger actually published The Good Samaritan, and for all the negativity that would bring for some people, leave politics out of it. I realized I was like, oh yeah, maybe making games and publishing books is for more than just unreasonable people who want to push a certain narrative, and I can get in there too. So after seeing that, I was really spurred on with the, hey, I have a computer, I have imaginations, I've been writing my own games in my head and my notebook for a really long time. All I need to do is just put some polish on it, and I could be a book publisher.
And you can also make your own art. So I guess that was also another problem that was solved there.
Yeah, I've been doodling off and on for a really long time, and eventually I started really getting better at it. I've been compared to Earl Otis in the past, which I think is a huge compliment for me. Some people say that on a technical level his art isn't super great, but I mean that's the art that built the house of tabletop role-playing games. Larry Elmore is great, and Frazetta is amazing, of course. There's nothing wrong with that, but just bringing it back to the whimsical roots somewhere between like the old Hasbro toy cartoons, but in black and white. So
you mentioned like The Good Samaritan, and like I mentioned your adventure, The Boys from Metzteas. I'll get it before the end of the stream.
For sure. That was a marketing error on my part.
Well, like you said, it's child. It's like you go into this because, like, for people that don't know, and all the link to Paddy's got like a Rumble channel, and he's giving away his product for free at the moment on Big Geek Emporium. So you can and the link is down there below as well. So if you want to go check it out, you feel free to do so.
Happy Free RPG Day. Free RPGs is every day at the Parlor.
But like I said, I was reading like I told you, I'm not sure that's something I would run, but I was reading it and I was like laughing my ass off. It is definitely a commentary. It is like, if not political, at least certainly satirical.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that you were encouraged by the Good Samaritan in that. Like, that's something I'm interested to talk to you about, because like it's often sometimes like people discuss about oh, should we keep politics out of the hobby, or should we? And I'm not a big guy at that, like, oh no, everything should be apolitical, because I say like, well, you can do that, but the other side is not.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's always going to be like the push from one side and the other side trying. So what is your take on that? Like, obviously you decided, you kind of like decided, you know what, I'm going to present some ideology there.
Yeah. So I had a bunch of other projects in the works before I published The Boy from Esteos, and The Boy was my first actual publication through Big Geek, of course. And it was just really interesting, the firestorm that started to happen when I wrote The Boy, because I've been futzing around on Facebook for a really long time with my own group and content creator channel on Facebook. Wasn't getting a lot of hits, and you really start to think that you're just an island, especially if you're a conservative gamer, or constitutionalist, or even just a normie gamer. You start to see a lot of the stuff that picks up steam, the conversations being had, and then like I said, it was on the Facebook, and I wasn't getting any reach. I mean, I had all my family, which I was super grateful for, supporting me every day. But then it was right around January, I started seeing people talking about Twitter, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to hop on there, and this will be like my last Hail Mary to try to generate some excitement for Paddy's Parlor Games and Mutants. And then I started talking to Venger, and he opened up the like his own OGL right before, legitimately 2 weeks before the OGL fiasco started happening. He was like, I'm going to do a game jam where you can use the Chalt IP and this, that, and the other, and you get to keep 100% of whatever you make. And I was like, well, that's kind of not fair. So then I started doing some more research on Chalt, and it was definitely the flavor that I wanted. Then you get into he had like Rainbow Pride Paradise a couple of years ago, and the Good Samaritan, and I was like, well, I'm given this opportunity to create something, and I wanted to support Venger because there were a lot of people that said, no, you need to keep politics out of the games entirely. And that's backpedaling. You try not to backpedal when you're fencing in a fight. You try not to give up that ground, and I don't want to cede that ground. And for better or worse, what's that line in Fight Club? You can yell and scream at me all you want, but I'm going to carry you kicking and screaming to the finish line, and hope that we make it on the other side. So, when it comes to putting the politics in the game, I don't necessarily like that you can go on to drive-through and you could buy these RPG bundles that support abortion, and then we're not even given the teeth to be able to fight back on that with one book that was given away for free. So I'm ready and willing to accept any sort of admonishment that I get for putting politics or whatchamacallit, just everyday news topics into my games. I'm ready and willing to receive all that. But I gave a copy of The Boy to Miguel and Sylvia of the Red Room, because I think it was like a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, they offered a free insensitivity reading process to combat the people that were doing sensitivity reading. And this is before they came out with Men, right before they came out with Epic. They took a look at it and they said, your book is just perfectly insensitive. You could have pushed the line a little bit further if you wanted to, but you didn't. And I was like, I was going for like South Park. I wanted to do, if there was a South Park flavored episode of Chalt, that's what The Boy is. So I don't know.
Because like you can recognize like the theme, or like of the current politics and stuff like that, but it's done like in a humoristic manner and stuff like that, and it's like it is, you would say, like The Boy of the look of South Park, but it's also like those old old comic magazine, like
that, like Mad Magazine.
yeah, exactly, like
Mm-hmm.
those type of. We had our own there in Quebec, so.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that's what I recognize as well. Like like it's definitely a caricature. It's turned up like, but so I think you hit like the right balance. And I'm not saying that everybody should do that, but I think it's good that some people will do it.
Yeah, and I think that's the case too. It's like if everybody and their mom is going to do it, it's going to get really annoying really fast. And that's one of the reasons why there are going to be enough of my books that I put out there that that's not going to be brought up at all, because even I would like to just get away from it every once in a while. But there's cathartic conservatives everywhere that just want to play something that they agree with, rather than being yelled at while they're trying to enjoy their own game.
Yeah, and I think here, like with the insert name here, is saying like the people that will control the issue topic are the people that will discuss and move the issue and topic. I didn't want real world ideology during my game, but we are here, and you can whiz, or we can whiz, and that's it. You like at this point, you're gonna have like ideology in your game.
Mm-hmm.
So might as well have a bit of both sides, or at least of your side,
or at least laugh while you're at it.
That's also a thing that a very good point, because like when our side does it, we make it humoristic and we make it fun, and when they do it, it's always so preachy and you manage like not to do it. It's like, oh, like you said, yeah, we laugh at it. I wasn't there like, oh yeah, I like something that's often discussed in comedy, that a joke can be political, but a joke is supposed to make you laugh. You're not supposed. If you really get clap, you're preaching. If you get laugh, you're making a joke. You know what I mean? And that's what they're going for. Like, they're gonna do like virtue signaling to get the clap. Well, clearly you were going for the laugh. You also you put your products on a Big Geek Emporium.
Mm-hmm.
To my knowledge, you don't put them on drive-thru. Am I correct?
Negative.
Yeah.
Big.
And you stream on Rumble, and
I
you don't stream on YouTube.
Mm-mm.
So I guess there was also like a consideration there of like not patronizing people that will hate you, and you really went with that. Was that the motivation behind that?
Yeah. So, like I said, I streamed on Facebook for a really long time because I was like, well, that's just the neutral ground, and I was trying to watch Rumble, but I wasn't really aware of how to make Rumble videos. So I actually ETS'd from the National Guard. I had a bunch of time National Guard and active duty, and I was, doing 70-hour work weeks, doing my guard time, doing all that. I just didn't have time to learn how to make videos or how to do anything more than go onto Facebook and hit start live video. So I was like, okay, well, this will be, where our hub is, and I'll send it from there. When I started to make time and I started learning how to do things, I mean, especially as it comes to Rumble, I would be remiss, and Big Geek Emporium, I would be remiss if I had these problems with YouTube, or if I had these problems with drive-thru, and I had an opportunity to be on like the breaking floor for stuff like Giant Slayer Games, Big Geek Emporium, or even Rumble at this time. I mean, I'm starting to make videos and they're picking up steam. I don't want to be that guy who hops in at the end to say like, we did it, guys. We made it. We've made free speech and truth, justice, in the American way. Meanwhile, there's all these other creators that are sitting there like, yeah, well, I was doing live streams when everybody was still only on YouTube to 1 or 2 people, trying to get people over there. So, if I want those things to be successful, I'm going to take the responsibility, do the best that I can to try to make those things build up. And Rumble, for a long time, all they had was politics this, politics that. Yep. And I was like, well, I do gaming stuff on my channel. So now that I know how to do it, I'll paint, I'll draw, I'll write my games on stream. And hopefully we'll get the people that, like I said, don't really care for politics. They can watch that stream while at the same time building up a platform that matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can respect that. Like, it's like I like people that are willing to sacrifice for what they believe in. So I have big respect for that. Obviously, I want to bring it back to the gaming topic, the creation topic a bit, because that's what those streams are supposed to about. But since we were talking about the boys from Metze ass,
Oh yeah, for sure. I'll talk about anything all day.
yeah, I want to know. Well, I'd like you to tell me about, like, because I looked at mutants as well, and this seemed to be like you were mentioning that you were kind of working on that before the adventure of the boys, but then you ended up publishing the boys before because you had like this game jam with Venger.
Mm-hmm.
So are you more like a, and I've looked at mutants, and it is a war game, a skirmish game for people who don't know. And I haven't touched those kind of game in a long time, so a lot of it kind of went up above my head. But then if you compare to Die 10, which is very light, you told me privately that it was still like a work in progress.
Oh yeah, Die 10 is a heavy work in progress.
Yeah.
I put it out there for posterity so that way I couldn't have someone else that's more popular be like, oh, he just stole our ideas. So I was just like, I'm just going to put this unfinished project out there. And again, it's free. It's, if anything, hopefully it just gives you an idea of, that you can make your own stuff. But anyway, yeah. So I have this book here that I want to show you. This is where it all started. This composition book that I've had for forever that my kids got a hold of and scribbled all over. It's all falling apart. But I have pages of lore, tables. I have crude drawings in here. I've taken this thing from here to Kuwait to the Virgin Islands. All of my notes that I've done from play tests are in here. And that's another thing that I would love to talk about is surviving your first play test, because that's rough. Surviving your first play test is rough. But I've been working on these games. Like I said, I've been pretty disaffected with a lot of industry people putting out certain stuff for a really long time. And I was just like, well, I mean, it's not like well, now there's the Pinkertons, but it's not like there's any police that are going to come to my house and tell me that I'm rolling my math rocks the wrong way. I do what I want. And I was working on them. And then, like I said, I started to get in with this Venger topic. And because of the game jam and it having an actual deadline to it, that's what really put my butt in gear. I was like, this is going to be my first book. I'm not going to stress about it too much, because sometimes you just got to put something out there. And sometimes I wish I would have just put Die 10 out first, because again, really heavy work in progress. Like The Boy from Mez Tejas, when I first released it, one of the event names was messed up, and I still think that the game is missing the damage dice for the Dragon's Breath weapon at the very end of the book. So I got to fix that and re-upload it. But yeah, it was one of those things where it's just like, I just wanted to test my chops and see if I can actually do it. And having this physical book in my hand I was like, it's real. I can do this now. So then I really kicked it into high gear for Mutants. And I actually have a test copy of Mutants in here somewheres that I took to Wargamer Girls Valhalla. And she's an absolute sweetheart. Her and her husband put together a really good show and a really good week-long adventure to a cabin in Salt Lake City, just outside of Salt Lake City. And Mutants was stress tested there pretty heavily. So
that's a lot that you mentioned there. Like you touch all kind of point that I'm so interested in, like the deadline. Let's talk about that. Like you said, like having this fire, like but not quite a fire, I guess, but like this okay, because you said you were been working on something for a long time, and then all of a sudden now you're like, oh, okay, I got this time, I got to, and now that was kind of the motivation. So that was important for you, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, for obvious reasons, I being the new kid in town, I wanted to respect the timeline that Venger had set up, and I believe there was exactly a month to get that done. So from start to finish, The Boy from Mez Tejas, all by myself, was written, drawn, edited by me, and put out there. He's got another game jam coming up. I don't think he actually formally announced it, but it's supposed to end the day of VengerCon. So from right now until VengerCon, he's running a game jam where, again, you can use Chalt, Encounter Critical 3, Crimson Dragon Slayer, and put out your own zine. And he did give me a little bit more lead time on that. And I'm still running behind because I was working with a couple other people, and then I was like scrapping my ideas.
Mhm.
So now I'm also on that timeline again where I would like to get it done by July 14th, which gives me a week to get a bunch of copies printed here and then sent to Venger to give out at VengerCon. So I mean the deadline really helps. I imagine it's kind of what some other writers do when they have a publisher that's asking them for a book, where it's not just like this kind of nebulous cloud of, I'm doing it as a passion project. I'll get it done when I get it done. No, now it's like, oh man, I have to write 3 pages today. I have 2 drawings I got to do by the end of the week. And then I got to get it sent off to like some people to check while I'm working. So that way it's not waiting on editing for, the last week. I can actually go on the fly and edit.
Yeah, because that's something I always interested in talking about, like the discipline of writing and like the actually like sitting there and doing the work. Do you keep to a specific schedule? Do you treat it like as a job, or do you just do like, oh, when inspiration come, I sit there and I write? What do you find? What do you find work best for you?
Well, my full time, I'm an apprentice electrician, so I work 40 to 50 hours doing that, and I'm the primary breadwinner. So really, it comes down to if there's time I can carve out between doing what little homesteading that I can and my full time, then yeah, I'm sitting down on my computer. I don't play many video games. I actually will watch my wife play video games while I work, so I can get that, scratch that itch. Try to watch movies that I've watched before for inspiration. Like right now, I'm making my way through Hercules: The Legendary Journeys, which I think is really appropriate these days. It just seems like every time I watch an episode, I'm like, man, that's like real life. But yeah, I can't just sit down. Like I've always got my book next to me. This is my new book. So you guys are you're gonna get on the ground floor for some new drawings. That like some stuff that I've been working on with the Red Room. I don't know if I want to show you the big bad yet, but working on some big bad guys, doing some new stuff. Let's see here. But yeah, I'm always sitting down, drawing maps, writing ideas in my head. Or I'm just like doodling little stuff. Like these are just map accoutrements that I can scan in and then toss into my maps later. Hand drawing my own fonts, stuff that I can do when I'm on break at lunch. I've got this is another really funny thing. Admonish me for being a Mac and iPhone guy. It wasn't my choice; it was my wife's choice. But I was working off of my Microsoft Surface for a really long time and getting almost nowhere. And then one day I was at drill. We had to get up and get going. Somebody grabbed my bag. My Surface fell out of my bag onto the floor, cracked my screen. And they have like a really bad history of when the screen gets cracked, they just want to blow up. And my wife was like, well, why don't you just try the iPad? I'm like, no, because all my stuff is on there. And now I have to relearn all the new tools. Started using the iPad. And I think I got 3/4 of Mutants done in 3 months versus 2 pages done over the course of a year or 2 on my Surface. And now because of that, I can just cloud everything and I can work on something on my phone and log into my computer later that day, and everything I've changed shows up right there. So that saves me a lot of time.
Yeah, so just going from a different tool like made a big difference like that. That's surprising. Is there like something that was getting in the way? That was a block with the Surface outside of like a?
Well, yeah. Because word processing. I was watching the Basic Expert show, and he was talking about Affinity, and I forget the other name of the art studio that he was using. But on the Mac, on your iPhone, and on
Clip Paint, something like that.
Yeah, Clip Studio Paint. That's what it is. And they're relatively affordable. I didn't realize how affordable they were because I didn't want to be paying for cloud fees. I didn't want to pay for the yearly subscription to something that might not generate me any money. My wife and I, we live well within our means. And so I try to be pretty Spartan about what I do. And Apple has Apple Pages as an app, which is a word processor / graphic designer. And it works really, really well with their Keynotes program and your actual like note app. And like I said, I could send it to anybody with an Apple and work with them, or with an Apple product and work with them over the cloud, just kind of like you could with Google Drive. But I feel like I have a lot more control over it because at any point, Google's going to do what Google's going to do. At least if it's on my phone, I don't have all of the other accoutrement from Google that I have to deal with and all the extra apps I got to get. So yeah, I started working with Pages, and it's pretty intuitive, easy to get a hold of. And on my Surface, Microsoft Word was expensive, didn't consider Affinity, and I was using that open source program. Scribus was what it's called, and it is almost impossible, dude. Just putting words on a page is nigh impossible sometimes. So it's pretty demotivating, especially when, I've got everything else: home improvement, homesteading, working, school. Now I've got my apprenticeship class that I got to do. It's like, man, now at this point, my biggest barrier to getting anything done was my time. And now a lot of that's gone. I can just type away and work.
Yeah, that's a interesting take there. Like, but that's something often people say, like, get the tools that get out of the way. Like, don't and something like I often complain about, like when they try to put too much bells and whistle, and then like, it's human nature. You want to use them and stuff like that. So just get something simple that do the work you need. You mentioned earlier, I'm going back to point that you said, because you give me a lot of quick content. You talked about a game surviving your first playtest. I'd like you to expand a bit on that, because playtesting, that's something I always want to talk about, because it's something that's important for games, but it's something that is hard to get, and to get like good feedback from playtesting, at least from the feedback from what people told me. How did you go about it with that?
Well, having a nerdy wife really helps. She's 100% my best friend. Our relationship started off playing Magic the Gathering together, and I'm not super proud of saying this, but my wife beats me mercilessly at just about every game that we play. So, having her around to help me test the game. Of course, my kiddos, they're super cool. My oldest son is old enough to start playing games, so he's really fun to roll dice with. He always gets really excited. However, your first test when you're writing a war game, especially if you've played a bunch of war games like Warhammer 40K, War Machine, Fantasy, Age of Sigmar. One of my favorite ones of all time is Mantic Games' Dead Zone. It's a sci-fi skirmish game. You kind of get jaded after, like Games Workshop can only renew the edition and make you buy their $80 codexes so many times before you're like, I don't want to play this game anymore. But you already have all the pieces to play with. So I took it upon myself as like, I'm going to make my own game, but with blackjack and hookers, like, started taking some concepts, and a lot of it from like the RPG game that I wanted to write, which was now called Die 10, where you use a pool of die 10s. And kind of moving forward with that, because the D10, in my humble opinion, is the greatest die of all time. But man, I started writing this game called Evokers, which you're also kind of getting in on. That I haven't talked about this game since I was working on it when I was streaming on Facebook. But I had a lot of rules that sounded good in my head that didn't make a lot of sense for the feel of the game. So then I like truncate those, put those in a box, separate that for later. And then you keep on writing, things that sound like they would move the game forward in an exciting way, or manipulate how you're actually using the dice to solve certain situations. And then eventually you kind of get all of the spam that you just cut off from your main cut, and it's sitting over there, and you're like, man, if I just solidify that and can it, put it out, that could be its own product right there. So that's kind of what Mutants really became. It was the amalgamation of all of the rules that I recycled and started to become its own thing. When I first play tested my Evokers game, there was a lot of tokens. There's a lot of little chitlins everywhere. The course of your turn took forever. And I was like, okay, well, that game sucks. We're going to make that whole pile of rules all the chaff, and we'll just make mutants into a game. So then I leaned really heavy into that. Then I play tested mutants for the first time with my two brothers, Jeremy and Ray. And my brother Jeremy, he's got a channel called War God Wargaming. He's on YouTube and the Rumbles. But yeah, I was testing with them, and like the game had no finished state. Models, just your characters, your miniatures didn't get removed from the board in a good way. So like everything sounded really good in your head, and that's what we call like your ephemera. You know, like, man, this rule sounds really cool, and this is the rule that I want to play with. Well, that sometimes your ephemera just ends up getting in the way of like your core system, and that's the next thing is at that point testing your core system, making sure Vince Ventrella, who is a huge 40K guy, and I think he runs Snarling Badger Studios with Tabletop Minions, Uncle Adam.
Tom,
And he was on another channel talking about your primary loop. And your primary loop is all of the actions that have to happen over the course of everyone's turns in order for the game to move forward and revolve around. And it's really hard when you're writing your first couple of games, especially if you haven't play tested, because anyone can just think of, okay, well, I want this guy to attack this guy, and he needs to roll this die first. And then if this happens, then he needs to roll this die. Anybody can really do that. But it requires a certain amount of mental fortitude to be able to put that on the table, have you realize, oh man, that sucks. And then keep moving forward anyway. Just keep on refining your game, because I mean that first play test is rough, but it's not the end of the world. You know, if you had a first play test, you could do a second one, and I struggled with that for a little while.
I think it's very interesting to bring this approach, because like, well, in writing we often say like you need to be willing to kill your darling when something doesn't work.
Yep.
You need to be able to recognize it, otherwise you're going to be stuck with something that doesn't work. But you mentioned like how the gameplay loop, and you write those rules, and you bring it to the table and realize like they suck. Like, and that made me ask, like, what kind of like do you go for a feel, or do you start with like, oh, I want to do like this theme, I want this game to feel in this way, I want it to be very fast, very cinematic, or I want to be very simulationist, and then you build rules around that? Or do you go more with, oh, this rule sounds cool, let's see what kind of feel it's gonna get? Which one are you?
So when the first play test of mutants was going through, and I was doing that, or when I was writing evokers for the first time, I was doing what sounded cool, because I've played so many different war games that I thought that I knew if something sounded cool to me, then it would have to naturally work. Yeah, it was dead wrong. But I think a lot of people can fall into that trap. I don't think it's a really bad trap to fall into, because sometimes you just gotta FAFO, you gotta F around and find out. And I mean, it's not like you're gonna die from doing your first play test, maybe from embarrassment, but you'll recover, I promise. So yeah, the rule of cool, if you're writing your first game, don't be afraid to do it, but also don't be afraid to move on from that. You might find a way to change the words on those rules and plug it in later that might make sense. And I plan on doing that with mutants, because the core book for mutants isn't the end all be all. I want there to be a succession of mutant zines that expand on the mutant themes, the classes of mutations that you can get, and some more campaign type rules. So getting a primary loop, I think, in terms of tone, right? Like you were saying, simulationist. Some people would say like old BattleTech is one of the greatest games of all time, because it simulates, loading your weapons, moving your troops across, targeting other systems on your opponent's robots. But some people, not everybody just has time for all of that. some people, you know, when they get to game, they get 30 to 45 minutes. Maybe they're lucky to get an hour. So for Mutants, I was like, okay, I want this game to be very parent friendly. You know, something where it's like the kids are down for a nap, or you know, we can put on an episode of Bluey and then go play a game for a little bit. And yeah, that kind of stuff was important to me as I move forward and I'm writing other games. Like for Die 10, right now the rules are really rough and it's a skill based game. I'm taking the skills out because, and I say this a lot, where it's like the decision to take skills out of Die 10 really came from a discussion I was having on Twitter, where it's like, how do you actually really negotiate social skills and stuff? Because I like it when people just role play, and it came from a point where I was running the Boy from Tejas with my brothers, where they were trying to lie to another NPC, and it seemed more fun, and in the world of Chalt, almost more believable for a lot of Chaltians to just be really gullible. You know, I mean, there's a baseline, and like I said, I always make the joke where it's just like, if mainstream media has taught me anything these days, is that NPCs require 0 skill to be lied to. And so now it's a dice pool attribute game where you know, it's die 10, so there has to be something thematic that goes with that, like dying 10 times before your character is like retires or gets totally off put. But you know, when I say dying 10 times, it's the way that the rules work. It's if you have your mind, body, and spirit health tracks, and if you lose one of those, you can fight, but at a huge disadvantage. And if you lose 2 of those, you're knocked out. And then if your character ever loses all 3 of them, then it's like permanent character death. But if you lose 2 of them, it's effectively character death. Your character gets knocked out, and you know, most things, some things will just straight up kill you if you lose the 2, because too bad, so sad. What is the mud core decision making there? Just to make people think about their decisions once or twice. And then with Evokers, writing the rules for that, I want it to be another fast-paced game, but I wanted to be a little bit more crunchy, not in terms of like the core rules, what makes the game run, but the decision making that people get to make over the course of their turn. So that's another thing, is when you're writing your own games, you don't want to like overly stretch your tones, so that way, oh well, Mutants, it's fast paced, but it's also simulationist. No, you kind of have to choose one or the other. So
yeah, Rick still said like we had a discussion about the social mechanic last night on Legend of Myth.
Oh yeah, I missed it. I was there at the beginning and I missed it.
Yeah, we did exactly talk about that. Do you want to, at some point, like it was like part of the discussion, but like, do you want to role play, or do you want to roll for the resolution? And yeah, so what were you saying there? Like, was a ring a bell, like resonating right there? How involved is math in your design? Are you like calculating, like doing the bell curve, going into those Dice program and looking where things fall down, or you just go by, you know what, we're gonna try that, and if it doesn't work, we're gonna try something else?
So I'm not a huge fan of like super like overly swingy games. And one of my favorite ones is by Joseph McCullough called Frostgrave, and it is a 1d20 game where it's like I roll a fight stat, which is d20 plus the stat, versus your fight stat plus a d20. And yeah, it gets super swingy. And even Joseph McCullough, when he released this game called Silver Bayonet, he decided to go to 2d10 so he can get the pyramid better curve rather than that flat line. For die 10, for role-playing games, I don't necessarily, there's always that conversation of balance. I don't think balance is a huge thing for role-playing games. It's certainly not if you're trying to write a scenario. It's not. So there's no testing that goes into there. If a creature is exceptionally deadly, then that's life. I'm not going to go fist fight a bear in real life. I'm not going to go fist fight a dragon in an RPG. I'm going to go get more equipped and better trained. Now, as far as it comes to wargaming, that's why a lot of Mutants is a D10 with situational advantages and disadvantages. There's things that you could do to add a die to the roll for what you're doing or what your opponent does via advantage or disadvantage, and it works kind of like it does in D20. Whatever D20 game was it, 5th edition? And that one, because the D10 is just such a straightforward number, I don't think there's a lot of math involved for that. But in the future, because there's a couple of other games that I want to write, I will be checking out any dice. I think 2d6 is, I mean, of course, all the math is done. I mean, anybody who's done any sort of college course, I'd imagine, probably had to write a thesis paper about averages. So I don't know, when I would say half and half. I don't want the dice to be so swingy, but when it comes to RPGs, I mean, I think your emergent story and how your players are reacting to stuff, that's really the main point of RPGs than it is balance.
Because now, like, that's something you mentioned, like you talk about, oh, when I was working in Mutant or Evoker, and now when I work on RPGs, that's something I want to talk about as well. Like, how does your because now you got like an adventure out, you got war game out, and you got an RPG still in early stage that is out as well. How does your working process varies from one type of product to the other? Is it like, do you approach it do you feel like it's a different kind in a mind space that you get to work on one the other?
So yeah, when it comes to war games, I've learned you don't write any of your fluffy stuff. So in Mutants, I'm not going to have the mutations or the weapons or the consumables drive what the core system of the game does. I instead have that fluffy stuff, the stuff that gives the game flavor. I let the core system drive the flavor stuff because that's important. When it comes to writing scenarios, I've never actually written a book, but I would imagine it's kind of the same. You imagine what the culminating event is, and then you just kind of work in pieces as you work to that culminating event, whether that's your big bad fight. So right now, I'm actually trying my chops at writing a one-shot horror adventure called A Stalker in the Dark, which is heavily inspired by a submission that Miguel and Sylvia from the Red Room gave me for the Skeeveteer. Fortunately, it was way too massive to fit into a zine with other submissions into it. And them and I are going to be working together on making an actual zine for that in the future. Meanwhile, I kind of wanted to do like a precursor adventure to that book in this next Chalt zine called The Skeeveteer. And like I said, I want it to be a horror themed thing because, that's what's going to work for the other zine that's going to come out. I know what my big bad is. I know what the big monster they're supposed to fight at the end. But now I need to figure out, how do I up the tension? Like what can I do to up the tension? What can you do to allow the players to bring the tension down? And then how much agency after they work to bringing the tension down do they have at keeping it down? So that way the tension comes back up for the big bad boss fight. And there's a lot of really fun things that you can do with that, like Diversity in Dragons. He talked, and I ended up stealing one of his little dice mechanics for an entry in the Skeeveteer. But he comes up with this one where you take a D10 and you, like, whoever rolls their target number 7. So whoever rolls and 3 sevens faster than the other one, then that action happens. And it's really good for like chase scenes. I've used it for animal rodeos, for taming wild animals. There's some really cool like mini games that you can put into your scenarios to kind of break up the monotony of some of the stuff. So when I'm writing RPG scenarios, especially these days, because I've done emergent stories with Iron Kingdoms. I've written back when I started playing around 10 or 12. I just had this thing with with like gladiator battles, and that explains a lot of my love for war games. But anyway, when I'm writing for RPGs, especially for Chalt, I just think of how can I complement Crimson Dragon Slayer, because that's what Chalt is made off of. To include Encounter Critical 3. Without adding new rules that change the core system, just little mini games for the players, puzzles, if you will, for the players to figure out. And then like I said, when it comes to war games, getting that primary loop, testing that out, and then creating all of the fun stuff with it. So
yeah, like Rex still say right here, like balance is typically more important in war games versus RPG because they're more competitive. Most of them have PvP. I guess that's probably like something very big
player versus
contribution
player,
as well. Yeah, with the in war game that you have to, because it's interesting. Like you said, you're gonna do like the core loop first, and then worry about the flavor. While in an adventure, it's almost the opposite way. And in a way, you get with the feel you want, the flair, the flavor, the tension, the beat, like the and so that's it's interesting to hear from somebody that has been on both sides, and you would think, and because when I was looking at Die 10 and at Mutant, I could see very different DNA. Like I would at first, because I look at Mutant first, and then I went to look at Die 10, and I was expecting to see something that would be not rule light, that would be like much more to find this war game DNA much more in it, but you went in a totally different direction. So I was I had like the assumption that because of somebody that would do both.
I mean, I would like to. One of the things that I really liked about the Iron Kingdoms RPG was it was the 2d6 system that was based off of their actual war game. So almost kind of it was kind of like seeing a redux of having chainmail become Dungeons and Dragons, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And War Machine is this hardcore competitive battle game where you're busting out tape measures, you're moving your guys. Sometimes you have to move them in straight lines. You, like Max was saying, he always laments like, oh, well, if I'm going to attack this guy, then I'm going to get a +1 versus my base stat for that. But as somebody who's actually really appreciated war games, I really enjoy that. But as a DM, when you're running those types of adventures, because I would make these combat scenarios for Iron Kingdoms that were very war gamey. That way at my table, because my wife loves playing the war game. She's not a huge fan of actually role playing. But then I have her friends or one of my friends that's not totally into the war game because it's too many rules, giving them options that they can do in the battle that's a little bit more forgiving for people that make grave tactical errors. And so for Die 10, I want that core system to be really, really easy, where it's you have your 6 attributes, and if you're going to do an option, then you make a die pool test with the number of dice being decided by what's left of that health spiral and your, I guess, proficiency with a weapon, not necessarily skill. So like if you had a character that had apprentice level mastery in swords, then you get 1 die in addition to what you would roll. And then you can have a novice, or I forget what I had. It was like novice, apprentice, journeyman, master, right? And that would just scale up. That way it's not this, oh, well, I get +5 because I'm taller than the guy, and then I get -2 because he can see my feet, and then silly stuff like that. I want the core system to be intuitive, and then for a combat system to be pretty similar to Mutants, because there is a call there for me where I really want to make solo war games and solo RPGs where, if you don't have a DM available or somebody drops out and you can't play without that person, you could always pick up a Mutant zine, or you could pick up a Die 10 zine and say, okay, well, we're going to run through this because we should be done in like 45 minutes, stuff like that.
I see. Another thing I wanted to talk about to you, and we mentioned it, that a bit, like about the getting the word out there and marketing the game and making people know that it was available. You mentioned that you were doing like the Facebook stream, and now you got like a stream on Rumble, and you're putting the products out there for free. And I came aware of you because like I saw you in chat and stuff like that, always with good comments. And so that's all. Like, what was your approach to for? Are you trying to get the word out there? Like, how did you feel about that? You try different approach that work better, or some that say, I know what, that's a waste of time. How do you go about it?
So, like I said, with Facebook, I'm a man of little means, so I certainly can't afford like actually making ads and marketing them on the different social platforms. Twitter was pretty interesting. I went from 0 to, I think I'm pretty close to 460 people that follow me. And at that point, it's talking to them, it's building these sincere relationships. And that's a big part of it, is building these sincere relationships. And a lot of people should try to do that. Talking to them, I'm not necessarily like writing their coattails, but doing kind of like the, hey, if you've had enough of this and you want a little bit of this, or if you really liked this, then you might like this. I mean, even in the back of my books, I do a little bit of promo for Victor, for John. Like at the back of Mutants, I put Wretched Space by the Red Room, Atomic Punk by the Basic Expert, the Modern Adventure Guide for the Scrying Dutchman. In the back of The Boy from Mez Tejas, I put blurbs out there for everyone else who put out a zine. Mm-hmm. So trying to help people build this culture of cross promotion. And the other thing too is, constantly going out, and it requires a little bit of work, but it's kind of inadvertent work when you're scrolling through Twitter, and there's always like work in progress Wednesday, TTRPG Rising Thursday, follow Friday, self promote Saturday. You find those all over the place. And kind of going back to what we started talking about, a lot of those threads are generated by people who would not want me around. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of pick and choose my battles. The Boy from Mez Tejas, I don't talk about a whole lot. And I probably should, because all of the money, as a matter of fact, money that I didn't even get from the Boy from Mez Tejas sales, I'm about to donate to a charity of my choice. But going on there and saying, you want to know what, even though this person has like pronouns in their bio and all of the different virtual signal flags in their username, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my stuff anyway, because there's going to be like one of three different options. One, the person's going to be like, oh, look at this guy, block. And then I don't have to worry about seeing their posts ever again. Mm-hmm. But the other part of it was, you get the people who are in those comments. Again, they're looking, it's almost like they're looking for a life raft. There are people that are like, there's got to be somebody reasonable out here. And I've done pretty well with that. Where I find people that, they scroll through there, because that was me too. They scroll through there looking for something that suits their interests, and sometimes they nothing lost, nothing found, and they pick it up and they like it. Or the next one is they come out at me and they get vitriolic, and then I get all the free press from them being mad that I showed up. So there's that. Doing shows like this is very helpful. So again, thank you very much. Being plugged in, because being plugged into communities outside the tabletop gaming community, because there's people out there that want to try it, that are just looking for something that suits their tastes just a little bit more than everything else.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned a lot of like the zine. Zine is a word that you use a lot, and that's something like we used to have a lot back in the days, like the zine culture and stuff like that. And sometimes it does seem to come back. Sometimes it does go away. And now I think we're starting to see it again, like more in the indie movement and stuff like that. It's starting to come back with the self-publishing, people putting stuff out there. Is that something like you do you have like a regular zine that you put out for yourself? Or is that something you plan on the future? Is that something you have you considered like avenue like maybe I guess it wouldn't be Patreon, probably with an alternative.
Nope, wouldn't be Patreon. That you are correct. I have a Subscribe Star and it's defunct because, like I said, I give away my books for free. There is a pay what you want option, and I will never stop anybody from doing pay what you want. Again, because the Boy from Ez Tejas, 100% of what I get from the Boy from Ez Tejas is going to that charity. Now, as far as like a ongoing zine, kind of like I think Yum RPG, he does D12 monthly, and then the Basic Expert has his zine. I'm not 100% sure I'm gonna do a regular zine, mostly because the time consumption. The Skeeveteer, I call it the Skeeveteer issue 1. I would like to do that yearly, maybe bi-yearly. I haven't quite decided because like I said, I still have a bunch of projects on my own that I'd like to get done. I'd like to put out a yearly book for mutants that's got different scenarios in it, different mutations, themes, and such. On top of the other like Die 10 and all the worlds I want to write for that. There is my Evokers game that I want to write. So as far as like an overarching, this is the Paddy zine where you can catch up with all of that. I think the Skeeveteer might be the closest thing, but that's still devoted to trying to help Venger grow Chalt because one of the things I was super happy about Venger doing was he did this last Kickstarter for his Under the Fuchsia Sky comic. And he was ready and willing to throw down and help subsidize people make zines for Chalt. So the stipulations were, the zine's got to be however many % or more Chalt themed. And he wants to see the product before he actually gives you the money. I mean, that's fair, right? But that's really cool. And like you were saying with zines making a comeback, one of the things that I try to do is I want the zines to be printable from home. That way you don't have to worry about like leaving it at your friend's house or leaving it at the game store. If your copy ever gets destroyed, you're out 13 pages and a little bit of printer ink. But making them so that way they can be printed from home as many times as you want, shared with your friends, written all over, and then reprinted all over again. I think that's metal and it's punk. So
yep. Yeah, and you mentioned about like that's always something that I'm interested in to talk about collaboration with other, because you mentioned you did some work with Megan and Sylvia from the Red Room, which I got on that show, amazing people, and work with Avenger, which I hope to have on that show one day. But how do you feel that the collaboration impact is it like a big motivator for you working with other people? Is it something you do because you think it's gonna just for the visibility, or is that something you really enjoy doing? Is it something you try to get the word out? How do you approach collaboration with other people, and what does it brings to you in terms of the creative process?
First off is wisdom. So I like on the Skeeveteer, I've been able to work with Lord Mateus and the Red Room, and that's really cool for me because, like I said, here I am, the new kid on the block, and having these guys just ready and willing to work with me on stuff. I just hope that I make them proud. And also it's kind of inspirational for me because some of the stuff that Lord Mateus gave me, I was able to draw a couple of my like favorite pieces I've ever drawn before for my zine, based off of his submission. And then with Miguel and Sylvia, it's the same thing. Like I've drawn up this monster now that I'm absolutely enamored with. I'm like, man, why didn't I think of that? Meanwhile, at the same time, it's like if there's a gap in the audience, and admittedly, I'm probably the one that's going to benefit the most, but creating this culture where we all just kind of work together and whether you want to call it building this community or building this culture, it's kind of irrelevant. The fact of the matter is, I think the only way that we stand a chance at going toe to toe with the giants of Paizo and WotC is just being buddies, helping each other out. If I'm on Twitter, I'm trying to retweet anytime I see someone post a link to one of the videos that they're working on or a book that they're published, or like I said today, Free RPG Day, both Vic and the Basic Expert,
John,
put out a couple of their books for free, which is really cool. So I think that's worth it. The other thing with printing out my zines by hand is I can go around town and I could just drop my zines wherever I want. I can go to my local gaming store and be like, hey, I printed up 10 copies of Mutants, sell them, do what you want with them. I don't necessarily care. But then hopefully somebody looks at the back of the book like, man, Mutants was great. What's Atomic Punk? I want to try Atomic Punk. Oh, where can I get it? Oh, Big Geek. Oh, that's awesome. Or Giant Slayer Games. So I don't know. I think not everybody has room for that. Not everybody wants to. I mean, especially me. I can't just expect everybody to latch on to Paddy because Paddy makes political games. but at the very least, if the people who like my political stuff see the non-political stuff created by people that I like, that's worth the price of admission for me.
Yep. Rex still say finding actually reasonable people on the internet is like finding a needle in a garbage bin. Like that's, well, if you find a needle in the garbage bin, stay away.
Well, especially in California, in San Francisco, stay away from those needles.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And yeah. I say San Francisco because that is where the boy from this Tejas occurs. So yeah. Just for context.
Yeah, and I was like, what happened if a crime's in process? Like, I was fucking laughing my ass off. All right.
Yep.
Like I said, if you didn't check that out, like go look at it, like it's worth like a good laugh. I assume most of my audience would find it funny.
Very good. Well, and Rex Steele, I kind of know what you're saying, but man, I found some really cool people. I found you, Joe and Randy, Jeff from Giant Slayer, Miguel and Sylvia. Like, there's a lot of really good people out there. It helps to know where to look, how to look, the patterns of the people. If you find one good person, more often than not, they know at least 3 or 4 other good people.
It's like a vein when you do mining.
Yeah. So I wish you the best, Rex. Still trying to find reasonable people on the internet. We exist. We're here.
Yeah. And what you were saying there about like, well, working together, promoting, I'm a big believer of that. Well, obviously, I do those shows. I do those shows because I want to give exposure to people I find cool and I find like interesting, and I do like it. So people, I would talk to anybody like that would want to talk to me, which would already limit the range quite a bit, I guess. But I think that what was I going? I lost my train of thought. Yeah,
cross promoting,
and also I do make those videos because I want people like I often said, every other GM got some products that say, oh, maybe one day I'm going to publish an adventure, my own system, a setting, whatever. Almost and very few do. So I like to make those talk with people that actually did, because like I'm interested in that. I'm just like making the step, having the balls to actually like put yourself out there, because when you put yourself out there, you also put yourself out there for criticism, and that can be hard. Is that something that you had to deal with? Is that something did you have like did somebody like came back all negative and say, oh, look at this trash? Or how do you deal with that?
No. I'm a pretty likable guy on a normal day. So I haven't actually had to deal with a bunch of backlash for even the thing from The Boy. I mean, I sent that out when I was really starting to know people, and I think I was checking out This Week in Geek and the Dutch Oven and stuff like that. And I remember sending that book to every panelist that was on This Week in Geek that I had seen that day, and sending them stuff. And that includes Grim Jim, who I adore. I'm sure he can take or leave me just fine. But If I would have known better, I probably wouldn't have sent it to him. But he's been really cool. I like watching his Roll Your Insight series, and I listen to that a lot while I write. But no, I have enough luck getting into my own trouble for things that aren't elf game. And maybe one day I'll be of enough importance to really, like, I don't know, maybe I'll put out the 6th Mutants book and Mutants is being played in every other household, and then someone's gonna be like, oh, but just yesterday he made this post, or he put out this game called, or this adventure scenario called The Boy from Es Tejas, and he's this and that. I don't know. Like you said, take it or leave it.
I think that's to be honest, that's the answer I was kind of expecting. But I think it's an important answer, because a lot of people like don't put their stuff out because they're afraid of criticism, and they say like, well, it's not that bad. When you start and you're small, you're not gonna get that many criticism, because like, well, maybe you fell below the attention of many. And then when you get bigger, then you have people to defend you. So hey, just put your stuff out there. Don't be scared. And it's like like I'm in. Sean often say like that people like, he's promoting people putting their video out there. So like, do your own channel, put your video out there, and people tell him like, I don't want to be like criticized and stuff. Man, if you're lucky, 6 persons is going to watch your video.
Yeah.
Don't worry too much about it. When you begin, like, put yourself out there if you want. If you don't be afraid of what people are going to think, and also you have to be able to say like, oh, you know what, it doesn't bother me too much.
And the other thing too, I was having this conversation with my brother Jeremy and my buddy Savage Brewski, and I do a weekly podcast with Savage Brewski. You could find him on YouTube and Rumble. And when I was talking to them, I just got done releasing The Boy, and I was maybe a week or 2 from actually putting Mutants on Big Geek. And we kept on talking about doing a podcast. My brother had been talking about doing a YouTube channel for years, and I was like giving him free commission. So his logo and his splash banner page I drew, and I actually drew those on my Facebook live streams if you want to check those out. But it was always like, I don't have the right gear, I don't have the right mic, I don't have the right camera. When I first started streaming on Facebook, I just had my crummy phone with the little camera on it, and it was me and my wife sitting at my kitchen table with no microphone, painting miniatures. Like I said, when it came to my book, I started writing it on Scribus. I bought Procreate on the iPad that I bought from my wife. I was using my wife's iPad, but we had Procreate on there, and I started doodling on that. And then there was the free Apple Pages, and then now there's publishing platforms that you could publish to for free, because you used to have to pay to host stuff.
Yep.
And same thing with Rumble. You get monetized day one. You could put your videos up. If you've got 5 followers, you can live stream. But there was other video apps, like I think there was one called Storyfire, where you had to pay to host your videos on there. So if you have an inkling, at the very least, you can even go to your local library, use their scanner to scan and email pages that you've drawn on. And that's how people used to make zines way back when. So something to think about.
Yeah, because you're still like you mentioned like the iPad and Procreate, but you seem to be like a very still like a paper and pen like a kind of guy, like a.
Oh man, you want to talk about something super embarrassing? So
What?
When I started to really learn Procreate, because before that I was using Microsoft's Sketchable, I think it was Sketchable, which is a pretty good program. I had like I said, I made my logo on Sketchable. My splash banner page, most of the original Mutants cover was made on Sketchable. But then I started teaching myself Procreate. I almost put down paper and pencil, not for good. I was like, well, I don't have time to really draw and then scan and then pictures and import. And then one day that was the other thing. My wife had seen me publish a book, and then she needed to use the iPad because now she wants to publish her own knitting charts, her own knitting patterns. So then I was out an iPad, and I didn't want to be that guy. I was like, no, you can't use the iPad that I bought you to go do the thing that I bought you the iPad for. So then I picked up a notebook, my forever notebook, I like to call them, because they go with me everywhere if at all possible. and started drawing on that. And I said, okay, well, I'll make it work or I won't. And if I can't make it work, then, maybe you gotta consider something else, Paddy, because if it can, what is it? Seneca says, like, if a human has done it before, if it's humanly possible, you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So started drawing on paper, and Procreate has this function where if you draw a line and you keep the pencil on the paper, it'll automatically straighten the line for you. Man, I think I had been drawing on Procreate for like 2 years straight. I hadn't picked up regular pencil and paper. And the first time I did, I went to go draw a straight line, and I'm sitting there staring at my mechanical pencil and paper, waiting for the line to straighten out. And I was like, oh no, Paddy, what have you done? Cyberpunk evolved. I can't do it anymore.
Cue a Kaczynski face.
Like, ah.
Yeah. That's interesting, but like, so I thought it was like a choice at some point too, because like some people, I still do a lot of my writing on paper, like with the pen. Like I find like when I just trying to put my idea together, it's still the best way that I don't know. I find like I can type pretty fast, but that's interesting. I thought you went back to that. You said it was just like your wife needed the iPad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was really cool too. Sometimes you go ahead and read that comment. I'm sorry.
Oh, you can finish your idea. Like
yeah. So my wife had a little consternation because she does knitting, and she's actually a relatively prolific knitting tester. So these creators, seamstresses, stitch witches, if you will, they'll create these charts that looks like hieroglyphics to me.
Yep.
But she can sit there and read it, and when she reads it, she'll stop and say, that's a problem, and then she's got to go type an email to the person who created the pattern and say, hey, I ran into this issue here. And I was like, you've done so many of those, you know how to write a pattern at this point. Well, yeah, why don't you make your own pattern and put it out there? Well, nobody wants to do that. Yeah, everyone else is this and that, and I was like, I think you'd do pretty dang good at it if you just did it. And then I remember the first time that she picked up a physical copy of The Boy from Ms. Tejas that I just pulled off the printer, and she's sitting there looking at it. She epiphany across her face was like, I get it now. And now, she's always picking up the iPad, working on her knitting charts, and then I'm like typing away on the computer, and then I got to look over and see if she's done with the iPad so I can snap a bunch of pictures of my paper drawings so I can ink them in Procreate.
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting parallel, because you mentioned earlier in the stream that you did playtest a bunch of games for other people and stuff like that, and your wife was like playtesting knitting pattern, and you say like, like there's a lot of a parallel there. Very, very interesting. Yeah. The command I want to say, like, insert name here, say, I gotta say the same. I've met plenty of quality people on the internet. In my opinion, it can be better format for finding people, because you tend to get a feeling of who they are before striking things up. Yeah, and you're not limited by distance, so there's that as well. And Black Lodge Games say, not getting your Jimmys rustled by other people is important, not only for content creator, but for life in general. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And Max from the Legion is joining us. So hello, Max.
Hi, Max.
Yeah. Is there, like I said, also, like, and I think it's very interesting to have you on, because like you mentioned, the new kid on the block and stuff like that. Do you have specific advice for somebody that would want to be the new kid on the block, that would want to maybe reach out to people, that would want to start putting product out there? Like, what would you say, like, the first step you would give, the first like advice to get out there?
Reach out. I think I've reached out to John and Vic, and of course Venger, Lord Mateus, Miguel, and Sylvia. These people are people who are living examples of having done it. I'll make myself available. I'd love to see anybody who goes out there and creates stuff. There's absolutely zero shame in saying, hey, I really like Chult, I'd like to write something for that. Or, hey, I really like Mutants, I'd like to write something for that. At the very worst, you're going to get told no. And at that point, you can always check right. And it takes, what is it, like Tolkien says, like, good people create, evil can only destroy. Well, I mean, it takes balls to create stuff. Strength, I should say. It takes strength. But and I think a lot of people would be surprised to find out how capable and strong they are if you take the first step. And if you need someone to lean on for that first step, I'm here. I'm sure you're here. There are industry people who want more like-minded people making content. And I mean, especially if you're going to go out of your way to make decent or better content for a game that already exists, I think a lot of people are going to be happy, because I mean, it's like free advertising for one. And if it's a lot of, hey, if you like this, you got to check this out. Or, I try to make a point in some of the, like the Chalt zines where it says, hey, go look in the Chalt manual for stuff to move forward on this part. That way, I'm doing that person a favor instead of being a total idea thief. But there's so many avenues, like Dragon Primarch 76 on Twitter. The dude lives in a shelter, and he goes to the library, and he types away on Google Drive every day to make his book. And I think he's actually made more revenue off of Big Geek Emporium than I have off of like 6 or 7 sales than I have giving my books away for free. I'm like the worst capitalist. This is the worst. Don't learn about business school from me. But like I said, the guy, he wrote on Google Drive, and he made a product that he could sell to people. So it can be done.
Bleaker asked, any advice to connect with two like-minded gamers on Twitter when you are new to Twitter and don't fully understand how Twitter works? I wouldn't be the one to, because I'm not good at Twitter at all. I suck at it.
Anything, I mean, humans made the platform. A human can understand the platform. Twitter's kind of funky. I don't even use hashtags that often. I think the first time I used hashtags in a long time was trying to advertise this stream. But you can find me on Twitter. If I'm following somebody on Twitter, or if somebody's following me on Twitter, I think you have a pretty good case to say that's a good person to follow. I mean, if they could put up with my political shit posting all day and stuff like that, that's a good place to start networking with them. Hopping in these live streams and talking, because then at that point you're networking with other people's Twitter handles, and then they follow you. And then, like I said, if I see somebody that follows me or is one of my mutuals that's putting out a link for a product they made or a show that they're going to do, I try to hop in, even if all I have time for is to hop in and give you a couple of these and say, hey, have a good stream. Sometimes that's worth a lot to somebody who only gets 1 or 2 concurrent viewers. And then it grows there. It's good for the algorithm. I don't think Rumble has one of those. Rumble doesn't have like a pushing algorithm. So that really is you doing the footwork of advertising your streams and whatnot. Yeah, man, Twitter, it's really easy to fall into some traps.
Yep.
But you just got to keep your head up. There's a lot of things that are worth hanging out for and interacting with, and there's just other stuff that you're much better off just, okay, all right, well, I was gonna make this game before I met you all, I'm gonna make this game after I met you all, or without you.
Yeah. For Twitter, I think like you said, like you start as soon as you find like we were saying, you find one person and then it lead you to another, and then at some point you kind of in the vein, and you can find like you can strike some gold there. But I would also like pick your battle. Like Black Lodge Game here say like it's much easier to make enemies on Twitter than friends, and that's true because people are very, and that I would say like pick your battle. Even when you see something that like makes you upset, like that's the internet. Like the internet is so designed to make you upset at everything, like because people react and get engaged. Learn to say, you know what, I don't like what I see. That I'm not gonna interact with it. I'm just gonna move on and try to find something positive. Yeah, that's cool, Paddy. Even drive-by engagement is good engagement for smaller channels. So he's Max is approving of your dropping the have a good stream.
Gotta give them one of these. Bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
And because that costs you nothing but your time. If I one of these days I'm gonna be an older man, retired, spending all day making games and painting miniatures. And I mean, who needs cable TV when every single one of my friends is streaming for an hour to an hour and a half at any time of the day, every day of the week?
Yep.
So there's a lot of really cool people up there. Max is definitely one of my favorites. I really appreciate his rants, and I appreciate kind of like Venger, just islands. Really good dudes.
Yeah, exactly. They're like and then like you radiate from that with the spoke, and yeah, we like I often tell Max, like I interact with Victor, like I knew Victor through him, and now that I'm pretty buddy with him and stuff like that, and I love people like I found John, and I found like the biggest geekist, and I found DM James all through Max's channel, so I'm very grateful for that, and I think the same thing could potentially exist on Twitter.
Yeah, so Bleeker, that's what I would do. You can find us on the Twitters, and that's a really good first step. And then there was something else that I had, but I totally mental dropped it.
I wanted to ask you about what's in the future for Party's game. You mentioned Evoker you're still working on, and is there like other?
Yeah. Sorry. So yeah, Evokers. I've got a playtest document that I'm either going to make time this weekend or next weekend to stress test with the wife. And then if that goes well, I'll move forward with that project immediately after the Skeeveteer. Then the Skeeveteer, like I said, hopefully it's my annual Chalt magazine. It's going to be the idea of it is to do. Is there a way I can share my screen with you?
If you do like possible? Present.
Okay, let me see if I could do that.
And I can do the screen layout thing.
So if you guys are here, you are getting the down low on the new stuff. All right. Let's see. Window, and I will do this one right here.
Yeah.
All right. So can you see that then?
Yeah, I can add stream there. Can
you
zoom in a bit, maybe?
Zoom in a little bit. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's gonna give it small for. Yeah, there you go.
Let me see if I could do something like this. So one of the things that I wanted to do with this is I want it to look like it is a actual like news article, a magazine that you can find on the world of Chalt.
Yeah.
But some of the skeevers, right? The skeevers are picking up this magazine, and in true original punk zine format, they're taking this magazine, they're clipping out pictures from other news articles and such, and then they're drawing in the magazine with their own tidbits, like as some sort of like rogue whatchamacallit,
publication,
like fact checkers. Yeah. So you can see I got this poem here is from Venger that I'm gonna write over. So it's like you have this letter from the editor and the table of contents. So he's just kind of like haphazardly writing over the table of contents because I don't really care about table of contents because I'm bad like that. This is a letter from one of the characters in my Chalt game. My brother Raymond wrote this about one of his characters that actually got knocked out in combat by a bunch of skeevers. So you get to read what he thought his character was up to during his time as a skeever slave. This is a weapon article written by Lord Mateus. And so this is one of my favorite pieces of art right here. And
I like the layout. You work with the this writing on the page, those page crookeds like that. I like how you play with and even though you do that, you don't go like full Morgborg. Like you still have the info there and the content. Yeah.
Yeah. So that there's still a lot of work yet to do. I'll stop sharing kind of right now. I don't know if there's anything like super duper fun. Oh yeah, the frogs. Yeah, we got. So that's my thing. I wrote in a couple of things myself. So.
And you already like have quite a good number of pages there. We can see.
Yeah, and I've learned that like the maximum number of pages for mutants about 52 pages, so it's 13 actual sheets of paper that
Yep.
when folded in half starts to kind of spill out the side a little bit. So 52 is a pretty magical number, maybe, and of course you have to do it multiples of 4. So I might
Yep.
go as many as 56 pages for a book, but hopefully not any bigger than that.
Yeah, if you want to do like the saddle stitch, it's pretty much then you have to trim them to something you can account it. Well, anyway, that's I could talk a lot about that, but that's young. So that's gonna be like the what we have to look forward to, like the Skivetier.
Yeah, the Skivetier is the next one, and then I don't know what comes after that.
What is the Evoker? Do you have like any how is it going?
So it's oh, you know, I should talk about this other thing too. I have this game called Arcanists. So Violence Solves Everything. If you catch this by chance, because he's a huge fan of War Machine and Iron Kingdoms, it's a Heartbreaker rule set, which is basically this game moved on without me. It's not a word for word rewrite, but it is my own editing, condensing of the rules. All of the core rules are there. I just have to make up the rules for creating your army. But that's one of the things that kind of sucks for me right now, is because I don't know where to begin for the game of that size. Evokers, on the other hand, I started writing that one because, of course, I fell out of love with Magic the Gathering, but a lot of what Kitty and I started our relationship on was Magic the Gathering. I mean, there was times when we were living in Indianapolis, we got snowed in while we were doing some shopping at Target. Snowed in. We were not allowed to leave, apparently, because the roads were dangerous. But the Starbucks was open, and they had just put out the I think the Theros set. So we picked up like the fat packs, and we sat there and like booster drafted games for like 10 hours.
Oh wow.
But as Magic the Gathering started to become too much for me and past my threshold of I'm not paying for that game anymore, I still really missed the feel of the I gotcha moments and the combos and stuff like that. So I wanted to create that into a war game, and thus I started coming up with Evokers. And in the original version of Evokers, man, I wonder if I've got any of these cards. Like I've made trading card game style cards. Like I wrote just pages and pages of these different elementals and backstories for the factions, only for me to not use them yet, and they're all just sitting there waiting to be used. Oh yeah, there they are, right there. Oh, so I made these on whatever Google's graphic design program is. I can't really remember what it is, but so I made cards for evocations and for different elementals, because Evokers was supposed to be like Magic. You're summoning elementals and you're casting spells. But the game has kind of gone on from that. One of the video games that I really liked when I was growing up was a video game that was Magic the Gathering, and it was like a Magic Arena of the Planeswalkers.
Yep.
And it was right before Wizards introduced Planeswalkers to the actual game. And the arena was set up. It was a small gladiatorial kind of arena where you had your guy with you had, I think it was like 6 different creatures and 6 different instant spells, and you walked your guy around and you summoned your creatures, and you're like picking up mana so you can summon more and cast more stuff. And I really liked how it was this real-time strategy where you were flipping through your cards and trying to counter what your opponent was doing, meanwhile buffing up your own creatures and sending them over. So I wanted to I set out to create that in a tabletop war game. And it's in a good place right now where I've changed the lore of it from being you're summoning elementals to you're training animals more like Pokemon. And then I ended up leading into that real hard, where it's like, okay, well, They live in this world where there's like essence, and it's a very palpable energy where they could take it and they can mold it into these phantasms that can physically affect them and the world around it, and they keep them inside these crystal shards and stuff like that. So that's kind of moving forward. Like I said, I've got a playtest document where one of the core mechanics, instead of trading cards, because this was really cumbersome, printing out trading cards, finding your old Magic cards. Like, I'm actually pretty sure I've got some expensive Magic cards behind these really crummy paper cutouts. Yeah, they're not all just lands, but anyway, it was too cumbersome to put the onus of printing out the cards, cutting them out, sleeving them, making it so that way you can actually use them as trading cards. And now the mechanic has shifted to a deck of playing cards. So your standard deck of cards with the 2 jokers in them.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm testing out the feel of, I think, having a shared deck, because the idea is when 2 evokers meet each other on the battlefield, they can sense the essence presence around them. And so they almost leech it out of the ground that they're fighting in, kind of like in Magic the Gathering, where you have your lands and you tap your lands.
Mm-hmm.
And the cards kind of represent the strength of the spirit that they're leeching out of the ground to cast like bigger and better spells, or to summon bigger and better phantasms.
Yep. Rex still earlier was saying like a stylish layout, but still very usable and readable. I don't know if you saw that, like about your
Thank you.
about. Do you intend, at the moment at least, like we never know what all things gonna evolve in the future, but like, do you intend for a Paddy's Parlor game to always have this kind of like DIY, a bit punk approach to game, where you can print yourself, or do you plan? Do you have like this idea? Maybe someday I'm gonna try to put like a more polish or like something published like professionally, or like print on demand, stuff like that.
So again, bringing up Wargamer Girl, her husband Tommy, he's one of my favorite people on the planet. He was telling me, and he has a lot of confidence in me, that if I would polish my book and do something with it and sell it as a box set, it would do really well. I grew up with not a lot of money, and like I said, I live pretty frugally now. I live well within my means, and like I said, I want to take on the responsibility of helping create a culture in a world where gaming doesn't have to break your bank. I have this program called Nomad Sculpt that I can actually 3D sculpt miniatures on my iPad. And I would like to even put out those STLs for free. So as far as like polished, doing like a Kickstarter, no, I don't necessarily want to do that. I certainly wouldn't mind having people help me edit. I had some super cool hobby heroes help me edit Mutants, and if it wasn't for them, it wouldn't be the game that it is now. So we had At Nap and Gingers, Savage Brewski helped me, and Sonicus Maximus. They helped me edit this book, and I couldn't have done it without them. That's the extent of the polish that I want to put on my books. For now, I like the black and white. I like my art style. And I will continue putting out my books as a pay what you want, because I don't want people to have to choose between, having fun or being able to buy a can of beans. So, I like what I'm doing, and I think I'm going to keep on trucking along.
I can see that. It's very honorable, and I can get that also, like somebody that play war game, play 40K, and play Magic the Gathering. We know.
Yeah. No, I'd really like to. I even make buildings out of these dollar store foam core sheets. And so one of my list of things I want to do is put out templates for Mutants terrain, like buildings and walls and such, where people can just print the template off their printer, cut it off of some cereal box, and then duct tape it together, and then you've got a Mutants board.
And also, I assume, as a creator, you put a game out, you want people to play it. It's a passion thing. So you want to make it accessible as much as possible. Like, money is fun. It's fine. We all like it, but
yeah. Yeah, I do. I think I put that in my tagline where it's like if I can just make, of course my games help my table. I'm not going to make a game that I don't want to play. I'm not going to write a scenario that I don't want to play in. So outside of my house, if I can just enhance the tabletop time for somebody, or like you said, you might not ever run the boy, but you picked it up, you read it, you had a bunch of laughs. That means a lot to me, because it's not incredibly for everybody. And if at the end of the day, the most you glean from it is inspiration for you to create your own thing, or take 5 sentences out of my book to enhance the tabletop time that you do get, I think that I've won. So
yeah, I think that's a good way to see it. Is there anything else? We're about to wrap up there. We passed the hour and a half mark, which is usually what I aim for.
Oh yeah,
I almost always go over. But is there anything you want to add in conclusion there? Like some point we didn't touch on, something that a message you want to send out to people that want to create, or is there something you want to add, or something we have to look forward from you, or anything really you want?
Like I said, I want to plug the Savage Brewski show. We try to do that once a week, and he's on YouTube and Rumble at Savage Brewski.
Yeah, I'll add the link to that. I didn't. I add after the show. I'm gonna add the link to that as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So there's that. If you want to create, I'm here for you. You can always bounce ideas off of me. Find me on Twitter. Follow the people that I follow and that follow me, because I don't think they're gonna steer you wrong necessarily. And then keep your head up. The world is always going to be a dark and a scary place, but if you take a little bit of responsibility to make it better for you and the people around you, I think that's contagious enough.
Thank you very much, Paddy, for joining me. I love doing those talks. It's always so interesting to hear from every guest I had so far. I always come from the similar question. They always had different answer to it. Always come from a different place. That's why I do those talks. I do them for myself, to be honest, because I am curious to hear about the creative process of those people and what motivate them and all this seating. So I want to thank you very much so for joining me on there. I put the link to Paddy's stuff down there in the description. I'm gonna add the link for the Savage Brewski for people if people watching live. Well, it's not gonna be there. If you watch later on, it's gonna be there.
Yeah, I'll send it to you right now.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And Paddy, I'll see you around in different stream. For the other people, next week, I'm gonna have Greg from Chronicle of Irises.
Oh, that's awesome.
That made a module for a supplement for Castle and Crusade, and he's working on his own game as well. He got a lot of stuff, so don't miss out. It's gonna be 1500 Eastern time. I'm gonna confirm the time. I have to check with him as well because he got our engagement on Saturday. But I'll let you know during the week. And other than that, you can watch my stream on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 past noon Eastern time. And I'll see you around. And thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you for everybody that watched on the replay. Thank you again, Paddy, for joining me.
Thank you, Mr. Max.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.